You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 165, Immortal Souls, hosted by Dan Terry.
Jeff sent me some memes today that I immediately had to delete off my phone. I mean,
he's getting out of control.
He is.
David Van Zandt.
It was like 2 seconds long. It was the nastiest thing I've ever seen.
Wow. I'm really glad I have that recorded. And Joseph Wren. Your Honor, he said it. I just reported on it. Thank you very much. Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you think all the music should be about fucking winter, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, that is David. It's cold outside, guys, except quite the opposite. I wouldn't know because I haven't been out of the house in over 7 days.
It's really not cold outside. I barbecued earlier, and it was beautiful while I was listening to Immortal Souls. That made it a little bit colder outside, I think, but for the most part, it's pretty springtime out here, which is, the perfect breeding ground for germs, and viruses. So, got to stay at home, got to be safe, got to do what the man tells you to do.
Inhale. Whatever. Always inhale.
It's cold for California, man. It's like in the 50s. Has been like that for a week. That's like freezing for us out here.
It's really scary. They're like, oh, somebody's listening to Immortal Souls again.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, this is just This has been an unprecedented thing, man. Like in my lifetime, it's crazy. I've actually been pulled over by police officers demanding to see paperwork. Like, where am I going? Why am I going there? And I was just going to buy, but actually I was like, no, I've got this work letter. So, yeah.
Apparently, a green Starbucks apron will get you by. Because we don't have papers yet, but if you just flash an apron, man, they let you go right on by.
I'll keep that in mind. I'll just steal a Starbucks apron from somebody. No, it's fine. I got an official letter. It's all like, Dan's an essential employee. So, yeah.
Be like, I'm literally making the things keeping these cats alive, homie.
Yeah. It's like, dude, I'm super essential. Like, if I don't talk about these albums, people might buy them. And then where will we be?
Hey, some of these records would be good if you bought them.
Absolutely.
Well, before we talk about all things Wintermetal, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, so if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at discussmetal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Well, we do love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion, but one thing that we like the most is when you guys share the episodes. You guys have been sharing every episode when it comes out. It's awesome. It's less work on me if that sweetens the pot for anybody. And, it's definitely a really cool thing to see you guys sharing that for people that may not know that their favorite band sucks, and we're here to tell them. Over on the wonderful world of Facebook, Lee Rydberg says, did one of you fuckers have seriously mentioned Ganglia in the Horde episode?
I've mentioned Ganglia like 8 times.
He mentions it a lot. Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time. It's great hearing two guys talk about bands that were so important to me as a youth. You were not always right, but you're always entertaining. I'm really enjoying the podcast. Keep it up. My only 2 suggestions are to stop speaking to that guy who refuses to understand that he is legend is amazing, and turn up the volume on the background music. To which I responded, just, not wanting to, we leave the music quiet so we don't get sued, is pretty much the main reason behind that. But I was like, oh yeah, dude, we talk about Ganglia. You have to talk about Ganglia. And, based on what we did before we got on mic, we looks like we probably are going to be talking about Ganglia here real soon. They don't really have a discography, so to speak. It's like a bunch of demos, and that makes me uncomfortable, but, we'll see how it goes.
They have enough songs to make a discography.
Also, Lee Rydberg is one of our newest Patreon subscribers, so thank you very much for that, sir.
Who doesn't like He Is Legend that you talk to?
Jeff. Yeah, Jeff doesn't hate He Is Legend, but he doesn't love him as much as we do, because he's wrong.
I don't know, man. I need a band that I either don't like or never heard before. That's why I was asking him if you guys have done Haste the Day, because I couldn't remember.
I don't know if you're going to like Ganglia.
I'll listen to it.
You're like, I probably will. Like, I mean, it's one of those things that you can't help but love it, even though it's terrible.
If you like it. You're cool if you like it, man.
You're super cool if you like it, yeah. Anybody that doesn't like it just doesn't get it. We got an email from Mark Erickson. Greetings from Korea, even though he's actually not in Korea anymore. He's in Japan now, which is probably a good thing. He says, "Hey guys, I listened to the BT Bam episode back in the day when you published it and then gave it another listen last week. I think you were a little hard on the band for succeeding so well with colors when they found their sound and then not matching that again later, though I love the Great Misdirect just as much, especially the last third or starting with a certain section in Fossil Genera through Desert of Song and Swim. My drop-off with them came with the Parallax, which had some strange production choices and was overly long. Still, I felt like the Alaska version of Color's approach, or vice versa, if you know what I mean. I actually quite liked most of Coma Eclectic, and then with Autonoma 1 and 2, more so like individual songs. Millions is amazing, and I really like the openers and closers to both releases 1 and 2. As far as other listening, I pick and choose out of various episodes, listening to most of the Christian bands, though not all, and several artists that I just have enjoyed specific albums, Deftones, Dream Theater, Metallica, etc. From what I feel are staple bands, Pantera, etc. By the way, I first got into heavy metal music from songs from the Penalty Box, and Sorrow is a Sage by Strongarm was one of the heaviest songs I'd heard in a long time. But what grabbed me was Blindside's Nerve and Slick Shoes Last with a sweet punk metal solo. And then he recommended that we talk about Refused, Thrice, Nirvana, and Soundgarden.
What if you do a Patreon episode of all the Tooth and Nail and Solid State compilations? Because there's some gems in there.
Yeah, there absolutely are. I was actually just looking at This Is Solid State Volume 2 and 3 and 1. And I was like, these would be fun Patreon go-throughs, plus the songs from the Penalty Box compilation.
So, Dan, tell me about Immortal Souls.
Well, Immortal Souls is a melodic death metal band from Finland. They've actually been around since 1991, if you can believe that. As a matter of fact, when I was going through these albums, I was shocked at how old they actually were. Like with their first record being in like 2001 and some of the EPs going all the way back to 99. So like it was, I was like, man, have I been listening to this band that long? It's just, they have such little output that, it's hard to quantify that it's been like 15 years, since the first time I heard this band, or even almost 20 in certain cases. And to me, they sound a little bit like Children of Bodom, a little bit like Dark Tranquility. They are considered melodic death metal, although I would not place them in the Gothenburg death metal scene. They don't really play those generic, they're not like bam 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 bam, like they're not that band. That was War of Ages. Check that episode out. But these guys literally play like what it sounds like. They play melodic death metal. It almost sounds more like power metal with growly vocals, because it's so positive and so melodic and very I don't know, you just get kind of like a positive vibe, and they call that positive vibe Wintermetal, because these dudes all talk about winter, or at least the singer does. They talk about winter all the time. They describe everything they do as winter metal. It's false advertising though, because like I've seen a bunch of like pictures of them and none of them are wearing coats. So
lead singer's bald.
Yeah, super bald. I feel like they should all look like giant Neanderthals, that walk around in the winter. Because if they're not wearing any kind of clothes, I'm expecting at least animal skins, some moccasins of some type.
So you're talking about People Mover at this point, right?
People Mover, yeah, something like that. And no, so I mean the winter metal thing is cool. It is the one thing I think that kind of sets them apart, although it is also kind of their detriment, in that I think at this point they're kind of stuck in that. I mean, when you look through the records, it's one of those like Under the Northern Sky. Well, okay, that's kind of cold. Then it's like Ice Upon the Night, Winterreich, Wintermetal. It's like, guys, we get it. We absolutely understand the concept.
And then you read through the song titles, and like every other song title has like cold, frost, winter, ice.
Yeah, it's just
definitely a theme. It's like if the Night King from Game of Thrones was in a metal band with a whole bunch of White Walkers.
Well, that's better than what I had. I was going to say it sounds like somebody listened to the Trans-Siberian Orchestra and said, you know what, guys? Let's do the winter thing all the time, only let's be serious about it.
I mean, you're not wrong.
For a band that started in 1991, it took 10 years to get a full-length record. They had some demos and EPs before that, but the first record, Under the Northern Sky, was released in 2001, and unfortunately, I get to say it again, good luck. If you can find it, great. We had to use YouTube to find it, because that was what was available. It's not on any of the streaming services. Thankfully, the later albums are, So apologies to the listeners for the terrible audio quality.
Yeah, I've still got the CD somewhere. I ordered it from Fear Dark Records back in 2002, and Fear Dark used to be like they were the first cool European label that signed Christian bands, but totally wasn't a Christian label. And the bands all like, I swear they all had to sign like an NDA, like saying that they weren't Christian bands, and that like because like apparently they were afraid that like people in Europe would like kill them if they found out that they were Christians, but they had like all the cool European Christian bands like Immortal Souls and Sletchvalk, and I think they had Morphia at one point. They had Kekel for a while, who's an Indonesian band.
Fucking Kekel, dude, really?
they had Royal Anguish for a while there. So I mean, they were a Christian label, but they weren't. But they weren't. And that's kind of where Immortal Souls has kind of always been. In that, like, clearly they're a Christian metal band because, like, they had songs like Christ Mass, and pretty much all of their stuff was about like it's winter outside, but then also Jesus. And it's funny. I actually listened to their EP, the Divine Wintertime EP, which I won't spend too much time on, but that was actually the first time I'd ever heard Immortal Souls because they had a song called Snow Soul. Because of course it was called Snow Soul, and so I heard that on Godcore.com. If anybody remembers that website, and I remember because I only ever heard like the first 2 minutes of it because Godcore would like upload MP3s, but you'd only get to hear like a minute and a half of the song, and like back then that was like really rough because like some of these bands that have these like because I think that song has like a minute intro,
so you get right to the apex of the song, and all of a sudden it's like nope, sorry.
My favorite thing ever was the first time I showed that band to Joe, and he was like, "Yeah, I like the music, but the vocalist sounds like he's gargling razor blades."
I haven't heard the EP, but I can imagine.
Quote me.
This was a time where we really weren't listening to much death metal. You know, the whole point of going on Godcore.com was, you listen to like 12 bands in like 3 hours because that's just how slow the internet was, and like you were lucky if you heard a band that sounded kind of like Korn.
And that was like the joke about Godcore was how long does it take to find a Christian band that sounds like your favorite secular band? That literally was the joke back in the day.
Was Godcore like the precursor to Jesus Freak Hideout or something like that? I didn't go to Godcore.
It was similar to that. I want to say it was active like maybe 98 until 2004. You can probably still pull it up on the Wayback Machine. Is that what Joe's doing right now? Pulling it up on the Wayback Machine? Let's get Godcore back up.
Oh, the Wayback Machine is currently busy, so sorry, guys.
Everybody's too busy flooding it, trying to find their favorite songs on Godcore. But I'll tell you what, it was a good website, and that's how I found out about like Immortal Souls and like Horde and Mortification and all that stuff. But Immortal Souls always stood out to me because when I listened to this first album, Under the Northern Sky, it reminds me of why I got into melodic death metal in the first place. Because I would say musically, this falls into the like early At the Gates, early Children of Bodom, early Dark Tranquility sound, where it's a little chaotic, it's a little messy. The chaos doesn't come from dissonant riffs. Like they're trying to create something beautiful, but they're also trying to smash a whole bunch of stuff together all at once.
Right, this is essentially old school death metal. It's thrash at its core with yelled vocals, not growled, just straight yelling.
Yeah. I mean, it's growled and shrill and gross. And I'm gonna just be honest. I've never really been a huge fan of this guy's vocals. There's just something weird about him that I'm not like totally into, but I'm not like a big enough wimp to like be like I don't like it because it's so extreme, But he kind of outclasses the music in a couple of places where they're very melodic. They're very like pretty and positive or whatever. And then he's all like, "In with the North," and it's just I don't know, like it could definitely take you out of it a little bit. It's a little bit much, but that's Immortal Souls. So I mean, you've signed up for it. This is what you're going to get all the way up until 2015.
Yeah, I dug it. It was the first time I heard it was this week, just for the episode. Just I didn't have it, so like Joe had to find it on YouTube. Probably the most traditional death metal sound. Like it doesn't really get melodic until like halfway through the record, and then you start seeing kind of like the Immortal Souls sound that is going to come in the future. But there's some good solos. I forget the name of the track because I listened to it on YouTube, so I wasn't following the track listing while I was going through. But the brother Issa has a sick solo, like probably like 3 or 4 tracks in that has like this like kind of 80s hair metal vibe to it. I was digging it.
Yeah.
But the vocals, I don't mind his vocals. I love it. Throughout the whole, like he has that kind of shrill death metal, but still shrill kind of sound. My biggest beef with this record is when he does the like clean speaking. It's not clean singing. It's more like just him kind of just yelling or speaking. And that part of the record really threw me off. I couldn't really get into it.
I think that, I've been saying Children of Bodom a lot is kind of what the band they remind me the most of. And I think that was kind of an attempt, because if you remember those first couple of Bodom records, there was kind of always those weird vocals in there where they were like shouting and just trying to like almost sounds like pirate metal in places.
Fucking pirate metal, dude.
I'm definitely not a huge fan of that in my melodic death metal. And it was kind of weird. They're not a super experimenty band, but I think that they do sometimes try to do too much at once. At least on this record, like I said, it's a little chaotic, but not like necessarily in a good way. This isn't a great record, but it's not like terrible. Like this is a record you would hear and still get into Immortal, like if it was the first thing that you heard. But the stuff that they did a little bit later on kind of like really blew it out of the water as far as having like a unified vision, and kind of like knowing how to go forward and realizing that sometimes you have to kind of trim the fat a little bit.
It'd be interesting to like go back and listen to some EPs that they put out in the 90s, because if you like look at the history of the band, they're listed as mainly melodic death metal, but then they'll have like the subgenres of like thrash under their name or like doom metal under their name with like power metal influences, and you can kind of hear some of like the doom style come out in this. Like it gets a little drudgy at times, and then it gets thrashy at times, and then it's like deathy at times. So you're kind of right. They're kind of like throwing a lot of stuff at the wall, see what sticks. And then the melodic death metal sound, they found their niche best. And that's kind of what they went through. So thankfully, they don't do a lot of that stuff in the next 4 albums.
Yeah, it's definitely a good record, but it kind of comes across to me like kind of flat. And there's not a whole lot for me to grasp onto. The melodies are cool, but they're isolated, like in a cold, isolated, frozen kind of way. And
keep it on top.
Keep it on brand. And then whenever Ice Upon the Night came out, it was kind of a game changer for them.
2003. I'm just going to say it. This is way better.
This is when hardcore kids that listen to Face Down Records in America got to hear Immortal Souls because they were they signed to, well, I don't know if they ever signed to Face Down Records, but they were distributed by Face Down Records. I think they were either still with Fear Dark in Europe, or they were on another label. And yeah, this was a massive improvement in songwriting. This was like every song has its own identity. It's kind of its own feeling. But me being an unpleasable metal fan, I will say this.
Ladies and gentlemen, unpleasable metal fan.
It's just like, wow, yeah, I want you guys to do stuff that's way more focused. That's what I want. I want it to be way more focused. Now I'm like, guys, it's so sing-songy. It's so verse, chorus, verse. You guys, you went too far. You shot over the moon this time. But you got to get back. I want you guys to be exactly 48 kilometers away from the moon. Okay, in one direction. This is what I want, because I'm in charge of your band now. But no,
you're turning into exactly how I pictured you as a metalhead.
There you go. I mean, it pretty much is. Like, no, this is what you guys are supposed to do. These are the rules. I wrote the book. No, you can't look at the book. You just have to know what I'm saying. This is really cool, though. Like this, I can see why they got as popular as they did off of this record, and why it was really smart for it to be kind of their debut in the U.S. because now they're playing on the same level as some of the bands we mentioned, like Children of Bodom, Equality, stuff like that. And they don't sound like those bands identically, but they definitely live in the same. They live in the same genre. This record is very, very, very good. The guitar melodies are fantastic. They are memorable. There's dual guitars, twin guitars. Everybody loves twin guitars, especially David Bunton from the Showdown. And this is why I got into this kind of music, was because I wanted something that was more like traditional metal. It was very solo-y. It was very melodic. but you still had like the screaming vocals and the double bass drumming and all that.
When you said that the guitars were memorable, that's like perfect. The first thing I wrote down when I was listening to this again is just the riffs are catchy AF. You like kind of hum them throughout the entire day, and in the best way. This isn't like an insult, but especially the first track, it reminds me of like an old like Sega Genesis title screen for like an action adventure game.
Yeah,
just like running in the background in such a good way. And I think that this came out in like early 2000s, but it sounds like something from the early 90s. I think it shows like their kind of power metal roots with the melodic guitars and that. But yeah, dude, the riffs and the melodies are amazing, super catchy.
And it has that old school death metal feel of. It's heavy metal at its root. It's thrash. It's traditional metal. It has the solos. It has the punk rock chug with the double bass and the beats. But then the vocals are just whatever the vocalist does, we don't deviate from that. I think the stereotype at the time would be the guitarist spends 6 months trying to get his tone right, and then we record the record. The drummer comes in, mics everything up, spends 3 weeks playing it. The bass player plugs in and basically sounds the way the engineer wants him to. But the vocalist, nobody questions it. Whatever he comes in with, that's what we do. And that's fun because that's old school thrash. That's the musicians are way better than the guy doing the vocals, but what he's doing is his thing.
Well, the funny thing about that is that the bass player is the vocalist and the vocalist is the engineer all at the same time. Like they did everything themselves.
Figure that shit out.
That's why the mix isn't super guitar heavy. I do have a couple of criticisms on this record. Number one, the drumming is just there.
That hi-hat, man. Hate to talk about the hi-hat again.
The drumming it occupies a space. It's drums that go along with the songs. There's nothing wrong with them, but there just ain't anything spectacular about him either. I mean, dude literally just plays his parts and like that's fine, but that just I don't know. Sometimes it can get really monotonous. Like I don't really pay attention to drumming that much, which is weird that I even noticed it or questioned it or whatever. But like I was kind of like, I wonder how good this guy plays like other stuff, like than just the Immortal Souls material. It's kind of rough. And the other criticism I have of it is that this record just sounds like hot garbage. Like the production is just, I don't know. I think this is like right in the middle of the loudness wars or whatever. But like it's mixed inside. Like you can tell it was like mixed for MP3 more so than having an actual dynamic range. So everything is super super loud and then just turned up like to where and that leads to the guitar sounding a little bit grainy. The vocals are so loud in the mix because, vocalist mixed it or mastered it or engineered it or whatever. And so, yeah, his vocals overpower everything. So it's just kind of one of those things where it sounds really good at the surface level. But if you're a production person, you're kind of trying to figure out what they were thinking whenever they did this, because it's super loud, but not in a good way.
It sounds like a self-produced record in 2003. That's what it sounds like to me, because everything you just said are mistakes I've made myself. But you don't realize it at the time because it was new technology to be able to actually sit down with a computer and make a record. And guys, this sounds great because it's real-time feedback. It's kind of like when you gave your mom a digital camera for Christmas and she spent more time looking at the pictures she was taking to make sure they were good instead of actually taking pictures, which is what she did the year prior.
This thing's got a little screen on it.
This is the best analogy I've ever heard.
You're welcome.
Which made me be like, there's arrow keys and a screen. I wonder if I can play Doom on this thing.
You probably can.
You can.
I'm going to say that the drummer, this was probably one of the first records he ever recorded because he doesn't do very much. Anytime you're doing a record yourself, it's a different kind of pressure than what you're used to with just playing with a band in the room or having an engineer. So he was probably just stressing out about, I got to get this right, because if I don't, he's going to make me do it again, and I don't want to piss everybody off, so I'm just going to play the beat. You actually have a fear when you're playing a record for the first time that you're self-producing, self-recording. You don't want to fuck it up, so you don't try anything. And talking about that real-time feedback, again, it sounds good because, hey guys, look, I nailed it. You don't have to go back and add anything to it.
Well, when your parts are that basic, like, how could you not nail it?
Well, I think Joe, like, I see what Joe's saying. Like, he's keeping it basic because he's so afraid to divert from, the 4/4 rhythm and add any thrills to it, then have to go back and correct it all. So I kind of see where Joe's saying too.
And this sounds more like a record of singles. We're trying to write the single that's going to get the band big. You listen to Firepower, and every song is great because it's Judas fucking Priest. But let's assume for a second that it wasn't. Every song kind of has the same formula. And I'm not talking about verse, chorus, verse. I'm talking about the way the songs hit, the way the composition hits. So it has that feel of we're trying to get everybody's attention because every song is a fucking single. Whether or not it succeeded is up to the listener. And I'm going to say it didn't succeed as well as the later records.
Something we haven't talked about yet is renowned session musician Chemo comes in and sings the cleans on this one.
Chemo.
Our friend Chemo.
Their friend Chemo.
David knows him personally, didn't you know?
David knows.
Hey, I've heard every album that Chemo sang on, every Immortal Souls album.
There you go. Isn't it just this one? No, he does some other ones too.
I think he's done all 4. I think he's done something on the next 4. Just everything but their first release.
Yeah, Man of Sorrow was this is weird because so they get a session vocalist in here, right? And he sounds good. Like, I mean, what's the next step for a band like this? Let's throw some cleans in there. And, I am thankful that they weren't shrill power metal cleans. They just sound like a man singing.
Yeah, some hard rock.
Which begs the question, why didn't one of you guys just sing it?
I think he tried on the first album. That was those clean yells.
Yeah, that's rough. It's funny you say hard rock because I feel like that kind of is this record. Like Joe was saying with the singles and what's going to get people's attention. A lot of these songs have very hard rock song structure to them. They are very formulaic, verse, chorus, verse. And it's funny because not a lot of bands that sound like Immortal Souls do that. So it actually makes them. It has the happy accident of making them sound unique because they're trying to appeal to people on a greater scale, and so you end up with again drums that are basically like hard rock drums with some double bass thrown in, and everything kind of follows a specific structure. And then you have a song like this where they get a guy that I guess they met singing karaoke somewhere, and we're just like, you want to take this to the next level? You see, we're a band called Immortal Souls. Oh, what do you sound like? Well, let me gargle these razor blades. I'll show you.
I was picturing that like a bar in Finland, and Chemo gets up there and sings One by Metallica. And they're like, hey, let's get this guy on the next record.
Yeah. Oh my God, dude. He's he can't remember anything. He can't tell if this is true or dream. It's incredible.
Speaking of Metallica, I feel like that his phrasing. I'm not going to try to pronounce any of their guys' names, but the lead singer. It reminds me of if James Hetfield was a death metal growler, just with his phrasing throughout the next couple albums. That's kind of the gist I got.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the vocals because I feel like he's sometimes more growl than substance. And again, it is kind of weird to hear vocals that brutal over music that isn't really, that isn't. And it's not that Immortal Souls isn't heavy. They're still a melodic death metal band. They still have that, but. I used to joke back in the day. I was like, all these mellow death bands, they're not really death metal bands at all. They're just power metal bands with a guy that growls on top of them. And whenever I say that, the band in my brain when I'm making that joke is Immortal Souls, because they're so their music is almost so happy sounding, which I mean, they would tell you, no, it's not happy sounding, it's cold sounding. And I'm like, it doesn't sound cold though. I mean, if you compare like one of the coldest sounding records I have is Transylvanian Hunger by Dark Throne. That's a cold record. That's really cold. It's there's an air conditioning vent right on top of me that's shooting little icicles into my skin. That's cold. So it's weird having to acclimate yourself with Immortal Souls' version of what cold sounds like. And as a music critic, I love making weird comparisons like that. Hey man, I could taste colors, and so I'm trying to find the audible representation of cold, which, before hearing Immortal Souls, I just thought was like wind blowing. But they're not going to let it go. We got to make fun of the song titles a little bit. and I'm not making fun of the band. I think the band is ice solid. Okay, but I mean, let's go through these track titles for a second here. Everwinter, Welcome to North, Edge of the Frost, Cold Streets.
They sound like R.A. Salvatore like book titles at Barnes & Noble.
Totally. Get them right now for $7.99 each.
Are we ready for the Winterreich?
Yeah, Winterreich.
My personal favorite record. This is the first record that I sat down and listened to because it was an Immortal Souls album. It's not the first time I heard the band. It's the first time I listened to a record. And it sounds like what they're trying to do. It sounds like a metal record themed around wintertime with thrash metal, solos, and growly scream vocals. That's it. Did you want something else? Sorry, not going to get it today.
This is a huge step up in the metal department. We'd complained about Ice Upon the Night being, or I had complained more specifically. You guys didn't seem to have as much of a problem with it as I did, but that record was very sing-songy, very hard rock based or whatever. This is much more like a traditional Melodeath record in that, the rhythms are faster, the drumming is vastly improved over what we had before, where they, obviously they sat dude down and they're like, look, man, you just do you. Like
absolutely.
You just do you. We're gonna play these songs and you just do whatever you feel like you need to do in each one of them. So you get faster paced. This is their most traditional Melodeath release in my opinion. And it's almost a throwback to Under the Northern Sky, but it's done by a more professional band, And again, Winter is still the forefront of this band. Night Frost, Frozen Inside, Icon of Ice, Black Water, Winter of My Discontent, Winterreich.
It's there. It's not going anywhere, Dan.
I'd be upset if they were shoving Jesus down my throat, but now they're just trying to shove ice cubes down my throat. And that's
I don't
fine.
know what changed in the production department. I don't know who figured something out or just made different decisions, but the vocals are much more balanced on this record, more in the way of Zao in the mid-2000s, where, Dan was doing that throat growl thing that he does so well, but you can at least hear him doing it. Versus it's too loud or it's too quiet.
Yeah, I mean this was still self-produced, but I guess they had just kind of learned, because one thing I like about this record too is it has a straight-up dynamic range to it. Like they had figured out that maybe mixing it for MP3 wasn't such a great idea, and now the cymbals don't stab me in the eardrums whenever I'm listening to them. It's a huge plus. Thank you guys for that. Zao's still not off the hook, and neither is War of Ages.
No complaints about the hi-hat on this album.
Yeah, it's good hi-hat. And welcome back to hi-hat talk.
No, it sounds great. Last album was everything was flat but turned to 10, and then the vocals turned to 11. This one's definitely way better mixed. The vocals a little bit deeper, but he still keeps his trademark shrill sound to it. It's not just deep for deep's sake. He still has his Scandinavian black metal shrill thing going on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it has a lot more character, I think, in this one. Maybe just because he backed up off the mic a little bit or wasn't cupping the mic or whatever it was he was doing beforehand.
Did you go through the lyrics on this one? Apparently it's a concept album in 4 acts, but I didn't.
I didn't go through the lyrics because I suck. But it's a concept record divided into 4 parts. Chapter 1, The Awakening. Chapter 2, Reflections of Doom. Chapter 3, The Shadow of the Valley of Death. And Chapter 4, The Passage. And I was very much oh, sweet, nothing about ice. But then there's still a whole bunch of stuff about ice.
It's all about fucking ice, dude.
Yeah. So we got that going on. I like this record. And it's hard to talk objectively about Immortal Souls because as good of a band as I think that they are, I don't think that they're the most interesting band out there musically. And that's hard because you can't really trash it for being what it is, because it's not like they're playing badly, and it's not like that they don't have a fan base, and it's not that it's not even that they're unenjoyable to listen to. That's very enjoyable. Spoilers, I just listened to 10 Obituary records. So putting this on was eating a bowl of vanilla ice cream with wintergreen lifesavers mixed in. But it was very, very, very enjoyable for this listen through after getting pulled out of the muddy swamps of Florida and getting thrown into the ice storm of Finland. It was quite a roller coaster. So yeah, Winterreich is not my favorite Immortal Souls record, but it is definitely the Immortal Souls that I started taking seriously. Like I started being like, okay, these guys are like a legit thing. They're hitting us with a concept record. They're still going. That was a big thing because I remember when Ice Upon the Night came out, it seemed like it took forever for them to get a second record out or another record out after that. It was only a few years, but I was a teenager, so.
And it's a concept record that I don't feel forced to accept it. It's not like I have to understand the composition or there's overuse of orchestral elements and we have these long tracks of just sounds that I have to figure out what the fuck they're trying to tell me. No, it's still a fucking metal record, and that's all I need. It can be a concept album if you want it to be, but I don't need it to be. It's just a fucking great record.
Yeah, I didn't know it was a concept album until I hopped on Wikipedia this week to like refresh on like the band members, and I was like, "Oh, Winterreich is a concept album. It makes sense." And keep on moving on. But you're right; it's not pretentious in like a lot of concept bands and concept albums are, where you have to like it because of the concept, not the music.
And it doesn't end with "Swim to the Fucking Moon."
Well, the thing is that like one of the biggest compliments that they seem to get, because I love looking up these Christian bands on the Metal Archives, and for whatever reason I get like kind of a sick pleasure of watching people just like tear the bands apart, and like it's totally unfair, and like there's no reason for it at all. But one of the things, the biggest compliment that they kept getting from reviewers was they don't have keyboards, even though like nobody would hold it against them if they did. But
right,
but
if it's power metal in nature, it's okay if it has keyboards.
Yeah, but like they don't go that way. Like they're just hanging out in the snowstorm. They're not going to slay the dragon. I
don't think they had anyone to play the keyboards. Like, even the lead singer's holding the bass in his hand. They don't have any extra hands to put on there. Les Chemo jumped in to play keyboards when he wasn't singing.
They haven't been to a bar and seen like a session keyboardist hanging around. So, but like that is one thing that I have to give them props for, is they are able to create melody and create that atmosphere, whereas a lot of other bands in this style like to use a bunch of tricks in order to accomplish that. And these guys just do it, and they're like, look, if we're not driving the point home enough, we'll just name more songs about winter until they get it. Name the entire album Winterreich, which is a really cool name, actually. Like I've never, like, it's very unique. I've never heard anything like that. It's not a generic term at all. So there you go.
2011 for the Requiem for the Art of Death. And now we went up our ass. Winterreich was fine, and then we had to go up our own ass. I can't blame them for trying.
We could be more critical about this one because it's not face down.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Now we can start talking just mad trash. No, I actually really like this record a lot.
I make a little bit of fun, but it's a great fucking record. It has a little bit more of the concept feel, but it's not so much that you have to buy into it. It's still a fucking metal album, and I still love it. I don't love it as much as Winterreich, but it's a great fucking record.
Is it only more concept-y because of the Roman numerals in the title and the song titles?
That is one of the criteria. The other one is the increased use of extreme dynamics, going from extreme quiet to extreme loud, extreme slow to extreme fast.
I just like it because it's heavier than the last one, man.
2011, dude, they had a few years to get it right, and I'm going to ask you, is this the first time they got it right?
Dan, your meathead is showing.
Sorry, I just realized my entire head was made of meat. Yeah, like this was them trying to do something legitimate, and you'll notice that they don't lean on the winter crutch really at all on this one, and that was kind of a refreshing breath of warmer air for me, because like only one song has winter in the title, but it's Nuclear Winter, baby, which is a whole different concept.
Oh, so this is a requiem for the actual winter season.
Something like that. This was... I don't think they talk at all about winter on this, really. And that's kind of what I liked about it, is I was like, okay, we finally dropped the gimmick, in the sense that, like, yeah, we're Immortal Souls. We wrote some songs about winter. That was, like, our whole thing. But, like, somewhere they realized that, like, okay, this might be a little much for people. If we put out another, if we put out Ice Upon the Night 2, people are going to be like, okay, so that was Ice Upon the Night on Monday, and now it's Ice of the Night on Tuesday, You get a little bit samey. This one, I think they switched it up quite a bit. The songs are heavier. The vocals are a little bit like deeper. and the whole presentation it's a little almost it's a little bit almost metalcore. Anybody else pick up on that a little bit?
I wrote that down. A little metalcore.
It had the vibe, but I think they got away with it because they didn't shove the metalcore vibe down your throat. Yeah, there's only so far you can go with thrash riffs in 2011, and they've been doing this for 20 years. So there's only so many different ways you can play your favorite thrash metal song from the 80s.
I mean, I was a little taken aback the first time I heard Immortal Souls play a breakdown. I was like,
yeah, but they got away with it because the whole album, like itself, they've been kind of like, it's a little bit slower than the last couple. It's a little bit like groovier. So having like the metalcore, like it's not like, you know, like a barn burning metalcore sound where it's just like insane fast guitars and then they throw in a breakdown. It already has that kind of slow groove feel to it, and then they throw a breakdown in there. I think that's why it works.
It was a good transition for them because, like, again, I hate to bring up Children of Bodom, but I'm going to do it anyway, so I must not hate it. It was kind of like whenever Children of Bodom was like, we're like melodic, power metal, melodic, and then they put out Hate Crew Death Roll, and it's like super brutal. And you're like,
where'd that come from?
What? Yeah.
Did you have this the whole time?
Yeah, I'm not complaining about it, but like with Immortal Souls, it, you know, there was a little bit of this going on in Winterreich too. They kind of like prepared us for this, and yeah. And I think that the slower, groovier music kind of works on a level that, you know, there's a lot of people that aren't fans of melodic death that would probably still dig this record just because it's rooted in other types of heavy metal than just sticking to one style.
By far the most like atmospherical record, like it just has that big sound to it. The production quality is huge. But and my favorite track is the Hypnotic Atrocity. I think just because of that bass line going in and out of it. That bass groove right in the beginning before it kicks in, just like every time I hear it, I have to go back and hear it again.
Yeah, it's awesome. And they actually went longer songs on this one too, which I think is kind of important too, in that like most Immortal Souls records that would top out around like what, 35 minutes, 30, 40 maybe. And that's usually enough, especially for what they were doing on those records. This one, they're able to slow it down, and they're actually doing interesting stuff, so it doesn't sound like as much of a slog. So, I mean, this guy drops in at 52 minutes, and it's not a chore to listen to. I was listening to it at work last week, and I really enjoyed how long it lasted without me. Like, I could continuously do a task without having to switch records, which was really nice. But yeah, this one, the only knock I have on it really is that, like, is this dude's vocals ever going to change? Like,
absolutely not.
This is him. He's here for life, baby. Like,
you can hear him getting older. Like his voice isn't as like high pitched as it was in the beginning, but it's definitely him.
But he's here to do the death metal thing. Even if the band is able to evolve and do more than old school thrash style death metal. Guys, this is my voice. This is the way I sound. This is the way the audience expects the vocals to sound. So I'm not going to change it. We'd be complaining if he started screaming, you know, like a hardcore metalcore guy and doing melodic choruses. We would all be yelling at him, but we're not, because he's doing exactly the same thing.
It's funny because there's a reviewer on the Metal Archives that complained that the vocals on Ice Upon the Night sounded super tough guy. And I remember being like, did we listen to the same record? Because this dude's vocals have sounded the same pretty much throughout. Like, he's pretty much always sounded like that. The only real differences you can hear is in the production. Like, but it's very clearly him. In a lot of ways, he is the Immortal Soul sound.
Yeah, it's not like becoming the archetype where, you know, you can tell when Jason Wisdom left for the final album with I Am, and like just it was like a screeching halt. Totally, the whole sound changed when he left. But Immortal Souls, like his voice is that sound.
Oh, becoming the archetype, the metalcore band.
Okay.
And I quit. No.
Signing off.
It's over. Inside joke, but yeah, this was a banger of a record for them. I think they really hit their stride on Winterreich, and this was them just following through with that, you know. Whereas a lot of bands that we talk about on the show, their first two albums are like fantastic, and then everything else just kind of fails to ever capture that magic. This is a band that started off kind of rough and smoothed it all out and figured it all out and got better over time. Which logically it would be a more natural progression, but strangely there's not a lot of bands like this that get better and better as they go.
2015, Wintermetal.
Guys,
I just went to the store and bought the new Trans-Siberian Orchestra record. What's it called, Joe? The Christmas Attic. What's it about? What do you fucking think it's about? They're on fucking brand for them.
Joe couldn't even say the title of the album with a straight face.
I couldn't, because in this case, I'm happy that they stuck with their fucking shtick.
Dude, don't fix what's not broken, man. Like, give them credit. They've been doing this for 20 years. They're just sticking with it.
Well, how many people heard this band the first time in 2015? There had to be somebody.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot.
So are they trying to change the shtick now, or are we going to give you what we're really about, which is fucking songs about cold-ass winter?
But they love it. It's not like winter's depressing or anything. Like,
It'd be different if it sounded bad. If it sounded bad, then we can make fun of it a little bit more.
Well, I think whether it sounds good or bad depends entirely on who you ask. Because this is 10 times more metalcore than we had on the last record.
This is Andy Adkins' level of metalcore. Vipers.
I don't know about
fucking or metalcore aerobics and shit. Like, everybody bounce with me.
I'll let you have it. To be honest with you, I'm surprised it took them this long to come out with a record called Wintermetal. Because I kind of like, when I remember looking at it and being like, really, guys? Really? Because like whenever it's like Immortal Souls, Wintermetal, I was like, this has got to just be like a compilation of a whole bunch of their stuff. You know what I mean? Like EPs.
Greatest hits, yeah.
Yeah, EPs, live tracks, something like that. Like there's no way they're calling their new release Wintermetal. It's like, guys, we just talked about this, how great it was that she kind of abandoned that on the last record. And I guess maybe they put that one out in the summer and this one came out in the winter. I don't know what it is. They still don't wear coats. I don't believe it for a second. But it is so doubled down here. First snow of winter, calm before the snowstorm, which might win the award for cheesiest sticking to our shtick.
That's the greatest title they have. Calm
before the snowstorm.
They need to follow up that song with Eye of the Snowstorm. That's the only miss.
Absolutely.
Dawn of the Northern Coldness, the trail in the snow. Then there's just a song called Snowstorm, which is weird that it didn't come right after Calm Before the Snowstorm. Cold,
it's the middle of the record,
land.
dude.
And then the title track, Wintermetal. Guys, we get it. But all that aside, this record was very much more enjoyable than even the last one was, in the sense that they have matured as musicians to the point where they're not doing the weird singy-songy thing that they kind of started out doing. They're hitting us with some heavy grooves. They're hitting us with some breakdowns. They're hitting us with the stuff that, like, I would almost even imagine that the writing process went something like this. How many records do we sell in Europe? Well, let's see, the epicenter of death, black metal, mellow death. Their competition in Europe's pretty stiff, as far as that stuff goes. They absolutely do not outclass the bigger bands in their genre. Like, let's not fool ourselves here. But they're looking over at those USA and Canada sales, and Facedown's just pumping them out one after another. And they're like, well, what do Facedown Records fans like? Breakdowns? Okay, we got that.
Throw some breakdowns in.
Yeah, it's more American. It's almost a more Americanized version of Immortal Souls.
Well, they're on Rottweiler Records for this one, which is like
that's
Frost
true,
Like Ashes and Abated Massive Flesh. And
that's true. Yeah, Rottweiler's kind of all over the place, like with Grave Robber and all that
Saving
stuff.
Grace.
Yeah, but these guys are definitely going, like, they just must be selling. Like, I feel like if they did a tour in the U.S., they'd do better than like a tour in their hometown. A tour in our hometown. This week we're playing at the coffee shop, and then next week we're going to play at the town hall.
I got to correct myself before the Facedown kids crucify me again. I said Saving Grace. Sorry, guys.
Saving Grace. That's the only way you're allowed to say that.
No, this might be my favorite. Coming from the guy, I'm always the guy that likes 2 albums, and then I stop listening to the band. So like the next 10 records, I kind of have to go back and listen to, i.e. Norman Jean. But this is probably my favorite Immortal Souls record. I love it. I love the vocals on it. The transition from First Snow of Winter to Calm Before the Snowstorm is absolutely perfect. You get that minute and a half long instrumental track, and then it just goes into the second track. I love that. I love that stuff. My only beef with the record in itself is that it seems like almost every track starts out slow, kind of ambient, maybe with an acoustic guitar, classical guitar playing in a background, and then it kicks in with the metalcore death metal thing. Kind of tropey, but if I could just get rid of that from my mind, definitely my favorite record.
It's a little bit more tropey for sure. And I think it's fine because, I'm kind of the audience that they're catering this to. And so, when somebody's providing me with what I want, I'm fine with it. I also like the fact that they, we talk about how they're more metalcore and they're heavier now, but like a lot of that too has to do with they're not trying to outclass the other mellow death bands, but in a certain sense they kind of are, in that like you look at bands like Dark Tranquility and the Flames now that rely very heavily on electronics and stuff in their music, where like they had transitioned away from kind of this sound. And Immortal Soul, it's kind of like what we were talking about with the War of Ages, how everybody else kind of moved on and they just kind of kept doing what they were doing. Mm-hmm. It's very much like that with Immortal Souls, because they're just the guys that kept showing up every day. And at the end of the day, if you're a boss, that's the employee you appreciate the most, is the guy that shows up every day, even though he's not the best employee you have. He's still,
consistent.
You're gonna get a solid performance out of him every single day, versus the dude that might do amazing but then calls in sick 2 days out of 5 every week. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, they are staying the same, but that's not that they're not peppering other influences into their music to try to stay relevant. So what they're doing is working. It's just that it's unfortunate that a band like Immortal Souls is never going to get bigger than they are. I feel like they've kind of plateaued as far as what their popularity potential is. Because at this point, what would they have to do to get popular? They'd have to like add in a bunch of electronics. They'd have to add more clean vocals. They'd have to hire their session guy in as a full-time member. It would have to be
not a full-time member.
Yeah, I don't think so. No, he still makes most of his money singing karaoke at the bar. He's listening to this right now. He's like, I'm going to kill every single one of those guys. And then I'm going to sing at their funeral because job security. But yeah, I just, Immortal Souls, they're just one of those bands that you're never going to have a bad time,
Is that your final thought, Dan?
Yeah, that's pretty much my final thought. The only other thing I would add is that, wear a coat because it's going to get chilly.
David, what about you?
It's cold. No, I love Immortal Souls, and you're gonna get that consistent sound throughout the entire time as it matures with age.
I don't think Immortal Souls is as underground of a band as I think they are when I listen to them. I feel like they're one of those bands that only I know about. Clearly, that's not true. But when I listen to them, I enjoy the calculated use of thrash, old school death metal, and even modern metal when you get into the later records. So if you are a fan of riffs, and I've been saying that a lot lately because it's been true a lot lately. If you're a fan of riffs, Immortal Souls is one of the best examples of a modern band that's old school in nature. They're not trying to sell me a heavy metal record in 2020. 2015 was the last year they put out a record, but they're not trying to sell me a record that sounds like 1989. They're just doing the next thing that they can do with their music. So if you're a fan of thrash metal, heavy metal, death metal, you need to listen to Immortal Souls. And it's going to get fucking cold, so you better get a fucking coat, to quote Dan. David, what's your album of the week?
My album of the week is Third Eye Blind's self-titled debut, only for the reason that I've listened to it times throughout this week. So, album of the week.
Dan, what about you?
Well, I was going to say Blindside's A Thought Crushed My Mind, but let's just screw it. Ganglia, The Beginnings.
That's all of our albums of the week.
Yeah. Everybody's favorite new band that's not new at all, but favorite. The ever-growing emo hit list. That should have been the name of the record.
For me, it's Immortal Souls, Winterreich. I said it's my favorite, and I meant it.
No one doubted you.
He got it for $1.
I did get it for $1. It was $1 well spent, along with the other $19 that I spent to get the other 19 records.
Did you pay for it with cold hard cash?
Does digital currency count as cold hard cash?
Sorry, I'm just icing you out with these cold puns.
As a matter of fact, I think they should launch their own Immortal Souls current digital currency, cryptocurrency, and call it Ice Chips.
It would be a cryocurrency, though.
There you go, cryocurrency. Perfect.
Take us out, DFT.
If you've ever been listening to this show and you want us to talk about a band that you like that we haven't ever talked about, or a band that we've been beating around the bush for way too long about, let us know. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can send us a message at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can always hit us up on Facebook under Discography Discussion. You can hit us up on Twitter at discussmetal. And you can even talk to us on our Discord server. There'll be a link in the show notes that'll take you right to Discord. As we've talked about a lot in this episode, it's going to get really cold here, so you might need yourself some Discography Discussion comfy socks. We'll have another link in the show notes to the Discography Discussion store. You can get some socks. You can get some hoodies. Seriously, guys, we got a $25 hoodie on there. You ain't going to get a branded hoodie from anybody that cheap, so check it out.
And on that note, this has been episode 165 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.